Natural Order Podcast, episode 21. That's how it is. It's not that way in Democratic or Republican primaries or in the one-on-one Trump versus Biden. That's just yelling versus drooling.
Back in the day, and I can't tell when, there actually was, it wasn't decided until convention for the Republicans and Democrats. Lately, by the time you actually get to convention, it's basically just a coronation. It's already known, but that's because the states themselves, the Secretary of State is financing the primarying for these parties. They're funding it, all the mailing and balloting and counting and whatever that all entails, rather than what we do.
Do you link your own sausage?
As a matter of fact, I do.
Why don't you go and put your trousers on?
All right, hold your horses. Heed! Pants! Now!
Natural Order Podcast starts right now. Welcome to the Natural Order Podcast with your hosts, Brian O'Leary and Adam Heyman. All right, Natural Order Podcast, Brian O'Leary and Adam Heyman back with you.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
We're doing well. Well, kind of. We had a little minor crisis. Glad we could get this show recorded here today. And thought I might have a minor delay. I only had a minor delay, not a full delay. So we're good. We're cooking with gas, like I said, offline. So my home repairment skills have increased a little bit over the last couple hours, but we're good. That has nothing to do with this podcast.
By which you mean you were able to find the telephone number of the plumber quicker this time.
Correct. Yes. Yes. So today we had in mind, or I had in mind anyway, to talk a little bit about political conventions. In particular, over the weekend, last weekend, I believe you were in California at the Libertarian Party convention in California. I want to know more. I told you I want to know a little more about how the sausage is made there as far as the convention goes. So just shoot. I'm interested, and I think a lot of the people are too.
Well, sure, I'm happy to comply, but I can't help but feel a little bit like I'm in the petting zoo.
Oh, really?
Oh, look, it's a libertarian. Look at his shiny fur.
A libertarian in the wild outside of the petting zoo.
Yeah, you don't ever see those in civilized society. So, yeah, just so I know where to sort of start, what's in your brain already? What do you think we're talking about here?
Well, so it is a Libertarian National Convention, right?
That's upcoming.
Oh, that's
upcoming.
So, the Libertarian Convention, the state convention for California, and they had national presidential candidates in a round.
They were there. Well,
or they were supposed to. So I don't know anything else. So
well, they had quite a few.
Okay.
And the reason being, well, let me give you the structure.
Sure.
Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in the United States. It usually has ballot access in all 50 states, and its structure is decentralized, as befitting a liberty-oriented organization. Each state affiliate is really its own thing, and they select national delegates at every state convention. The number that they're allowed is based on their population, roughly.
Okay.
And then those selected delegates will go to the national convention in May in the District of Columbia, or Mordor, as we affectionately call it. And at that point, those delegates assembled will select the Libertarian Party nominee for president and vice president.
So it has nothing to do with like the way the Republicans and Democrats do.
No, I'll get to that in just a second. So what happened in California, they are very, very large, maybe the largest affiliate. So they have over 100 delegates that they're sending. And so people seeking the Libertarian Party nominee want to be there to speak to those delegates and hopefully influence them and get their vote. So yeah, our presidential nominee is chosen at convention, and what you're used to seeing is what the Republicans and Democrats do. And they, because they're corrupt and powerful, have leveraged the finances of the state, all states, to get those states to run primaries or caucuses for them.
Yeah.
at
But
at taxpayer expense.
I think I'm correct in saying that prior to, I don't know when this started happening, but there used to be that at the convention was when the Republicans or the Democrats actually picked their thing. You could vote, but that was kind of to get the delegates and or kind of get a sense of who wanted who, but it wasn't official by any means. And it sounds
Back in the day,
sounds like
and
the
I can't tell
Libertarians
exactly when. Yeah, back in the day, and I can't tell when, there actually was, it wasn't decided until convention for the Republicans and Democrats.
And the way it is now,
lately,
just to be clear, that's why the Super Tuesday and New Hampshire primary, Iowa, it kind of tells where the wind is blowing, and then people either drop off.
Not only where the wind is blowing, it's over. By the time you actually get to convention, it's basically just a coronation. It's already known who, but that's because these the states themselves, the Secretary of State is financing the primarying, for these parties. They're funding it, you know, all the mailing and balloting and counting and whatever that all entails, rather than what we do, which is the delegates show up at convention and vote there. And that is, it's a more old school way to do it. The body determines who the nominee is.
It's a Republican form of government, in other words, like small r.
In other words, exactly. Got to go to the minor parties for you to find actual republicanism.
Right.
And we're not the only one. There's other independent groups parties out there, the Green, Constitutional, a couple of others.
Yeah.
They're much smaller and they don't get ballot access in all 50 states. We might not either, but we'll be a lot closer.
Okay.
So, I attended California's because it's big, and I thought it'd be interesting because Cornel West showed up on a panel to debate with a couple of our candidates, and so did Robert Kennedy Jr. in a separate panel. And the discussion was very interesting. These fellows aren't remotely libertarian, but it was really nice to let our candidates sharpen up their rhetorical skills against these fellows. And it was nice to get some of the national spotlight that came with these people who are more famous than any of our guys.
So is there any chance that these folks will be, a greater than zero chance that they could be the Libertarian Party nominee, or were they just there to sharpen their axe too?
I'm not sure why Cornell came. I think it's just because he likes to speak in front of people and, gather as many, eyeballs and followers as he can. Kennedy, on the other hand, is sort of sniffing around hoping to get the nomination because he's serious about his run. He's really annoyed. I'm speaking for him, which obviously, disclaimer, I can't read the man's mind, but it seems like he's pissed off. He wanted to run as a Democrat, but the DNC is corrupt and would not let him. Mm-hmm. And so he is learning painfully and at great expense just how crooked our elections processes are. And it's very, very expensive and difficult and time consuming to get on the ballot in all these 50 states.
Right.
The R's and D's have conspired with these state governments to make it ludicrously difficult. And I'm sure a guy like Kennedy, that had to come as a shock. He believes in the myth of our democratic republic. And, he probably thought all he had to do was get a barbecue's worth of signatures together and you can get on the ballot. Well, that is not the case.
Yeah. He is kind of the worst of the worst in many respects. In almost all respects, he was pretty good on the COVID stuff, except it turns out he wasn't that great. He was better than the rest, but it wasn't a high bar.
He's been against, or warning people about the negative side effects of vaccines for quite some time. And so he was predisposed to be suspicious of this one. And I don't remember if he complained about the lockdowns in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
I know he speaks out against them now, but I'd be curious what his opinion was in early 2020.
Yeah.
When it mattered. And I don't know. I know he's good on the Ukraine war, and then he's very, 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 very bad on almost everything else.
Yeah.
So it would be a little goofy for the Libertarian Party to choose him as our nominee because he would not be representing our principles very well. On the other hand, the argument on the other side is he would do a tremendous amount as far as us gaining a whole lot of votes. So many so that we'd get matching funds. We get treated as I don't know if we'd get treated as a major party, but in a lot of states, we would immediately get that designation.
Yeah,
a lot of good things would come from it.
There is also a point too where you pick a staunch, hardline libertarian such as yourself for vice president.
Well, that'll give him some life insurance, I guess, which a man with the last name Kennedy needs in this deep state regime. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for the guy. I think the deep state murdered his uncle, maybe his father, although that's less certain. And when you hear the man speak, I find him charismatic and appealing. I think he has the right kind of vision for what this society should be. I just think he has a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature and dangers of centralized government power. He wants to use it for good, like all naive politicians do. And he just doesn't get the danger there. And he doesn't see the beauty and power and health of a decentralized political structure.
Yeah. All right.
I wish I could sit him down and talk to him because I like the guy. I think he's an honest actor. He was asking some hard questions in the panel in California this weekend, and I wish our guys had given him a better answer because it didn't look like he was just being ideological and dogmatic. I think he was actually curious. Well, how would libertarian political philosophy solve the pollution problem and the tragedy of the commons, and regulatory capture and stuff like that? And we have great answers for that. And he wasn't hearing them back, and I thought it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. So as far as that goes, so the convention in California was a place not for this stupid round, like line up all the candidates and call it a debate. So what you're saying is that we're different.
Well, they do that.
Different panels.
They do that in a lot of places, and they would have done that here. Oh. But since they were able to attract the attention of non-LP candidates who wanted to participate, you couldn't call it a presidential debate. So instead, we organized speaker panels, essentially.
Okay. Why couldn't you call it that? Just because? Or legally?
Just because they're not in that. It's a category error. Two of the participants would not be LP presidential candidates.
Even though they were there?
They're just in a room talking into a mic. I mean,
are you saying Kennedy and West in particular?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like West isn't interested in the LP nomination as far as I'm concerned.
Kennedy He is interested in becoming president of the United States.
He's running as an independent. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought.
I doubt he'll show up on the ballot in many places. I don't know how far he's gotten.
He's bat guano crazy himself, but
I don't know if he's crazy. He's interesting.
Unless he's changed his views over the last 25 years. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, just because he's a Marxist doesn't mean he's insane. He's an interesting guy.
But anyway, go ahead.
Charismatic.
Definitely charismatic.
He's educated. He throws a lot of very learned philosophical verbiage into his speeches, and he's got the charisma of an old Baptist preacher. He was calling Jacob Hornberger Brother Jacob at the panel, and they were getting along really well. Although obviously, the man's just a socialist, and there's no reason he would even pretend to seek the libertarian nomination. He's nothing like that.
Yeah.
But I like the guy. I find him entertaining. I don't want him anywhere near political power. Don't get me wrong, but he's a very entertaining speaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he reminds me a lot of the rent is too damn high guy.
Yeah.
But so all right. So we got these panels. So let's say, did you attend any of the panels? All the panels? Were they concurrent?
Yeah, I attended them all.
Okay. What was your major takeaway? Well, I mean, let's cut to the chase and just say who performed the best out of all these people, West and Kennedy included.
I didn't think West and Kennedy performed well at all, considering the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Kennedy is just unapologetically a man who believes in big centralized government to solve a certain set of problems.
He's a New Dealer.
No, I wouldn't say that. It's different. It's a different flavor. It's a different set of government levers he wants to pull. But from a libertarian perspective, it's just all wrong.
Sure.
I thought on the panels, Michael Rechtenwald did quite well. I thought Mike Termott did okay. Just presenting their message, not from any other perspective. Jacob Hornberger delivered his message powerfully. I'm not sure if he dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, but he's very articulate and passionate, and was great to see. So I don't know. I found it all entertaining. I'm not going to declare that anybody came out with, clearly ahead.
Yeah.
I think going into this convention, if Dave Smith had followed through with his intention to run, I think he would just be a dominant favorite. Since he fell out, I think right up until the last vote is cast, it's going to be a question mark who ends up with the nomination. I really do.
All right.
Unless Spike Cohen throws his hat in the ring at this late date, because I think he would run away with it if he did.
What's so great about Spike Cohen?
He's just a very, very effective communicator. He's a plumb line libertarian. He never gets distracted by any of the shiny nonsense. He just delivers a very persuasive argument for smaller government. Whatever your issue is, he will tell you why decreasing the size and scope of government will make that issue better and not worse.
And in 2020, wasn't he the VP candidate?
He was. Yeah, that was the first time I'd ever heard of him.
Right.
He came out of nowhere, and he was great. He was way better than the presidential candidate was.
Yeah, I want to get to that for a second. So you mentioned Rechtenwald, Mike Termott, Jacob Hornberger. The last cycle, 2020, not that I cared or was going to vote for any of these people anyway. That I was in the phase of I believe voting's evil. I'm not in that phase anymore, but I still am very suspicious of the whole process.
Yeah, you should.
So, yeah, and we've talked about it on the show before. But in the 2020 cycle, I liked Hornberger quite a bit.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of his for decades.
I liked his message, but I think during the whole COVID stuff, I lost a lot of respect for the guy. Just the way his rhetoric and actions were. I don't know much about him otherwise, other than his rhetoric and just becoming a presidential candidate last time. But I was actually kind of shocked that I thought he was like him and maybe one or two other people were head and shoulders above anybody else. And then all of a sudden they nominate, I think it was Joe Jorgensen, who I'd never heard of. Not that I'm really in depth with the Libertarian political party, but I gather like you hadn't even heard of Spike Cohen. And he was a vice president thing. But the thing was, I mean, I guess getting back to how the convention works, it's like there are pitted for and pitted against certain candidates so that you can't necessarily just run away with it. Like if a majority or
well, you could run away with it if you got a you got a majority on the first ballot, you win
50% or more.
50 or more, yeah.
Okay.
But that is not going to happen.
A high plurality does not work.
No, no.
It's more parliamentary in nature.
If Dave Smith ran, you'd probably get it on the first ballot. I think if Spike ran, you'd get an even higher percentage, oddly enough, because he is much less divisive. Spike. There are people that just hate Dave for this and that partisan reason.
For being Dave Smith.
So just the path, it's kind of interesting. The path in 2020 for someone I'd never heard of, and I've been a libertarian for over 30 years, for someone I'd never heard of to get the nomination was a path of being the least objectionable.
Right.
Because in a system where you need multi-round voting until you get a majority, oftentimes it's the person that someone detests the least that sort of glide planes up without ever really being noticed into being the one that, ends up getting all the votes that are required. And I think there's a candidate or two this cycle that can ride that same glide path. Of not being particularly exceptional, but not being particularly hated, and that might be the way to go.
Do you have a name, or do you think like all three of those folks you mentioned have that same possibility?
I don't think either of those three can follow that particular glide path. I think somebody like Mike Termott could.
Okay,
he's been campaigning very hard and very effectively for a couple of years now, and he hasn't pissed anybody off as far as I know.
Right.
He could do it. I'm not sure if anybody else has that particular path. And someone could just come and be totally inspiring at convention or in these couple months here before and and win it in the early rounds of the balloting? I'm really not sure. It's a huge question mark. What's going to happen in DC?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. As far as, if you're immediately hated for being whatever. I mean, you got Michael Rechtenwald, who was admittedly a former Marxist and a pretty hardcore one.
Aren't they all? Yeah, like 6 or 7 years ago, even he was a full-throated, left all the way Marxist. But what I've always said, we've got people here in the Libertarian Party in Nevada who were Marxists a couple of years ago, even.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing about Marxists, as much as I detest all the goofy ideas they have, they are people who are not just reflexively leftist. They read and they think, and they believe they found a system that explains their worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they can be shown that something in that system is wrong, they can be converted. A lot of really great and heroic and principled libertarians came from being Marxists. Walter Block, famously, Gene Epstein, a lot of them. The point being, it's a powerful thing to believe in ideas and not just have some sort of reflexive opinion. And so I like guys like that.
Yeah. I would agree with the fact that, reflexive thinking is just not the way to go. And I see that in political candidates of most stripes. I wrote something, let's try and find it and put it in the show notes. But I think it was for Ron Paul candidacy in 2012, how I talked about how Ron Paul was a reflective candidate. He very studied man, and I mean, still to this day. Well, and I had him theoretically facing off against the incumbent Barack Hussein Obama, who, by all accounts, is a incredibly reflexive politician and not all that reflective of a guy. But that's, I think, just in the nature also of the Democratic Party these days, and particularly maybe even both major political parties. That's what it looks like. But getting back to Rechtenwald, he has aligned, I believe, with the Mises caucus in the Libertarian Party, and I'm probably like you, a big fan, because I'm down with Misesian economics and those type of people. But there are people in this movement that absolutely hate anything associated with Ludwig von Mises, Mises Institute, Mises Caucus, free market economics, even though they call themselves libertarian. Granted, the economics does not necessarily play into political philosophy, but it does, wink, wink. But so Rechtenwald has his enemies. I think he has maybe a lot of the big time support, but he also has a lot of the big time enemies.
Yeah, I think
that's
correct.
Fair analysis? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big split in the party. I mean, it was taken over a couple of years ago, I guess now. And the people who are still in it, who used to be in the ruling majority, do not like the Mises caucus. They had a very different philosophy about how to run a political party and what things were valuable to them, and it's just very different. I personally believe they were less studied, less principled, more reflexive. I think they had I'm mischaracterizing to a certain extent, but hope you'll forgive me. I find that they were a little bit more libertine. I think they cared much more about social liberties and values than they did war or economic things. I don't think any of them had studied economics at all, let alone Austrian economics. They were willing to court power. They'd been in the DC Beltway for far too long. I mean, if you're happy in championing nominees for president like Bill Barr or Bob Barr,
yeah, I believe.
Bob, and then with Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, those are just weak sauce if you're running as a principled party. These retread Republican governors who didn't know the philosophy, Gary Johnson was hemming and hawing about drug legalization, saying, yeah, sure, for weed, but not for anything else. I'm not a radical. Well, where are your principles then, Gary? Well, he doesn't have any. You know,
Yeah.
he's just sort of a reflexive libertarian. I want kind of less government. I want people to be nicer to one another. Well, okay, but that's not going to get anybody excited.
Right.
That's not going to make them change their political philosophy like Ron Paul did, like Ayn Rand did, like Murray Rothbard did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we need people, in my opinion, championing our principles at the highest levels who will convert people from whatever they were before to libertarians. That's what we need. And a guy who's just sort of, well, yeah, you know, libertarianism is kind of fiscally conservative and kind of socially liberal. You know, that's weak sauce. I don't want that for our messaging. I want something that tells people where we stand and why on principle. And so I'm hoping that's what we get this time around. Rechtenwald would certainly fit the bill. There are others, and there are people that I think would be kind of terrible. So we'll see.
I would say it's interesting you mentioned libertine as a descriptor for these folks. I would say that a lot of folks, even today in the general public, hopefully people that are listening to us, but I think people that listen to us regularly can have a bit more of an understanding of where we're coming from. But I think the general perception out there is that libertarians are these libertines.
Yeah,
they don't understand the nuance, and it's not even nuance. It's like almost hammer over your head of Misesian economics and stuff, and how that applies, and particularly to the political philosophy, even though they're separate. So, like you mentioned, the Beltway folks, the Beltway libertarians, the Reason Magazine libertarians, who I would classify as very left leaning, but they're not Democrats, so they get away with it. Oh yeah, I'm a libertarian. I like, you know, they cherry pick a couple things that fit their lifestyle, and they say, yeah, I'm a libertarian, but more libertine in nature. But it brings me to the kind of the analysis of what a libertarian is, and juxtapose that with what a conservative is, or libertarianism and conservatism. Hang on. It's, if you decide you're a libertarian, or if you decide you're a conservative, you are, because they're so broad. They both have such broad tents, and I don't identify myself as a conservative really anymore, even though I would say, yeah, I probably am if you go to Russell Kirk and look at all the stuff he writes. But there's no way I want to identify myself with this current conservative movement. Now, with the Mises Caucus and all this stuff taking over this Libertarian Party, I think it gets the idea of what a libertarian is more in line with the Libertarian Party.
Oh, I sure think so. I mean, that was the whole point. And as far as the Beltway groups, I have a lot of respect for what Reason did in the past, and I love that they
it's a gateway.
give Remy a platform, and they support the Soho Forum, Gene Epstein's debate crew. I mean, there's still some good people there doing some good stuff.
Right, just like the National Review is the same thing. There's a couple good writers, but the rest of them are loathsome.
Yeah, I think Cato has completely lost the plot. I think Reason is on the way to losing the plot. And the reason is, no pun intended, I don't think they have any kind of a principled foundation for their libertarianism. They just have a handful of policies that they prefer. They've thrown them in a basket and said, well, that's pretty much libertarian. That's not how it works, folks. It's a principled political philosophy.
It's a pretty solid analysis.
It's a principled philosophy, and you don't just sort of guess at what the answers are based on your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You deduce them from the non-aggression principle, for the most part. You deduce them from your understanding of private property and free association. And committed principled libertarians can come down on different sides on different issues, but it should not be and is not because they don't know what the principles are. It's that principles are sometimes tough to apply in certain situations. Like with the border situation, it's very difficult to decide whether you should have open or closed borders when you're talking about a thing that should not exist, which is the commons, things supposedly owned by the public, as if that were a thing that could be done rationally. And the abortion one is another problem where we all believe in individual rights, but they're difficult to apply in this context. And I can understand, I can make arguments on both sides. I'm not going to say what my belief is, but the point is, it's not just I have some feelings and then I choose these positions and then I call it a political position. And I see conservatives do that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Democrats don't even pretend.
No.
They'll just come out and say, I have these whims and I want government power to enforce them. I mean, they're scary. And conservatives are all over the point too. They don't have a principle, except for the theological ones. But even there, I mean, who speaks for what God wants? None of these people can agree. So,
well, I would say that conservatism is a much more principled idea or system of thought than liberalism or progressivism or whatever. But the problem is, in the modern day idea or movement, conservative movement, so-called, is that they'll stick to those principles until it's really time to hammer the libs, and then we just do whatever they don't do, and we try and score points there. Well, it's like, come on, like, what are we doing here? I'd like to sing Kumbaya and all get along, but that's not the reality. I think
my problem with conservatives is they only pretend to respect individual freedom when they're out of power. Get them in power, and they'll be using the gun and the bullhorn to tell everybody what to do.
I guess my problem with conservatives is that, just like I mentioned earlier, if you want to call yourself a conservative, you can, because that's kind of the way, unfortunately, Russell Kirk and other thinkers like him defined it. It was like big tent. Kirk didn't particularly get along with libertarians at a certain point. They ended up all kind of coming together in around Reagan for the most part, and we saw where that went. It was a kind of a nice coming together moment for the old right, basically, in conservatism and libertarianism. But then, once the Reagan era ended, that was totally shattered. The Cold War, once the Cold War really drove a stake through the heart of that. But I guess another real problem with the whole Reagan era was that all these neoconservatives got in there. And they were nothing like these folks that had the intellectual heft to bring a guy like Reagan, an ex-actor, very charismatic man, into power. They were nothing. They were power hungry folks, and they call themselves neoconservative. Not many conservative principles other than they're not Democrats anymore. Although we see a guy like Bill Kristol, neoconservative, he's back to being a Democrat. So I don't know where to take that. But the point is, I think we need some solid principled thinking in our politics, and we don't get it. And I'm thinking that in your party that we're at least approaching it.
I hope so. I mean, we need to get attention, and we need to pick up steam. We need to get people to see that the party they're in probably doesn't really match their values. Maybe it used to, maybe it never did, maybe they were pretending, but libertarianism has principles, and I believe that political philosophy is the only one where humanity has a future. It's the only one that'll allow us to flourish and not rip each other's throats out, and that's kind of where we're at. And, the conservatives, I think them buying into the Cold War was their biggest problem. There were people on the right, the old right, as they used to say, that weren't down for all this empire stuff, but believing that
Robert
communism
Taft
was
and all that.
Yeah, the belief that you needed to socialize at home and have your own evil empire to successfully combat the other one. I think that was a poison pill that just destroyed conservatism.
Could be.
How could you take it seriously after that? And case in point, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they didn't want to give up their empire at all. They just pivoted to the Middle East and South America and other places.
Yeah, and I think, we can quibble about that all till the cows come home, but I think that's largely the conservative movement hijacked by the neoconservatives is really where it comes down to, and these people are nothing like me. They're not my people.
Well,
This is where I guess the whole point, not the whole point, but a real point of this podcast and how I got to be friends with you, Adam, is that I don't necessarily want to go down the road of the Libertarian Party, but I'm not invested in the Republican Party either. What happens for me, I see with Libertarian, how I got in with Tom Woods and the Mises folks and all this stuff, they made sense. They thought about things. They had rational arguments, whether I agree with them or not. I don't agree with, like, I'm an island of myself. All these other folks, the Republican Party, other than say Ron Paul at a certain point, where are they? Like, where is the intellectual heft? What are you thinking about? How in the world do you come to these decisions? Whether I agree or not with the plumb line Libertarian Party or not, I think nowadays I can kind of get behind more of the stuff they did because of people like you and Dave Smith and all the aforementioned people.
You know what's great, Brian? We've talked about this before, but the power of the internet here and the breakdown of the gatekeepers of media.
Yeah.
You have Ron Paul talking to Tucker Carlson. You have
Right.
Dave Smith on with Candace Owens. You have these people talking to each other and rubbing off on one another in very encouraging ways. And if we can get a little more of that, maybe we can break ourselves off from these charlatans that have controlled these parties for so long.
Mm-hmm.
They kicked Murray Rothbard out of the right. I forget that goofball who ran the right for so long. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Buckley.
Yeah, Buckley. These people, these frauds. We're finally getting past the gatekeepers and talking to each other. People of goodwill, people who want the best for this country, who want flourishing and peace and freedom, and for us to leave each other alone and, not just shout at one another and force our morals on one another in these ridiculous ways, these destructive ways, these woke ways. I used to hate me some Puritanism, and today's woke left is more Puritan than anything you've ever seen that Cotton Mather could ever throw at you. So, yeah, I hope that people are listening. I hope they're looking at the principles of the Libertarian Party. I hope our messenger that comes out of convention in May and is on the campaign trail until November, I hope they speak clearly. I hope they're persuasive. I hope they're empathetic, and I hope people give them a listen.
And you want them to vote Libertarian. You don't necessarily want them to upset one party or the other, depending on the state. Just vote your conscience.
Vote your principles. Think long and hard about what they are. Realize that the other party are frauds. I mean, in the last several election cycles, there have been no positive arguments made for the candidates. It's just demonizing the other side. You can't risk having this other person in charge.
Well, yeah.
What's the gag? Yeah, I might have killed a couple people, but my opponent has killed 5 people. You can't let him be in office.
Any other thought is a vote for Trump.
It's just so dumb. I hope people are able to correctly perceive it as puerile. They're talking dumb to you people. Don't fall for it.
So do you have your weight behind any one candidate? You don't have to say who it is, but are you pushing, other than Spike Cohen, who's not technically in
if it somehow magically appeared to be Dave Smith or Spike Cohen, I would unabashedly say that should I be chosen as a delegate from Nevada, which will happen by the time this podcast airs in a couple days at our convention here in Las Vegas, and if it had been one of those two, I would be happy to say that my vote would go to them.
Okay.
But I am not tongue-in-cheek. I'm undecided.
Right.
I like Michael Rectorwald quite a bit. I love Jacob Hornberger. He's been great for so long, but I'm not thrilled with the way he's couching his message lately. And Mike Termott is unoffensive. Those are the 3 that I'm looking at. But there's a lot of others that are out there that could all of a sudden, catch fire. So we'll see. I'll go to convention and it'll be interesting. We'll see what the delegates choose. Hopefully I'm one of them, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in that. The only kind of political thing, the only other political thing I have is that in California here, next week as we're recording this, we have a primary upcoming, and the only person I'm actually excited about voting for, or only thing excited about voting for, other than voting no on whatever comes on the ballot, which is common. I mean, all the time I do that, and I recommend that strategy for everybody. Don't just vote no on everything. I think Adam even has a hat that says no. But is Steve Garvey. I want Steve Garvey to be the next senator from California. Not because he's an awesome politician, not because I know anything what he's about, not because
Baseball.
Oh, I loved him as a kid. I loved him as a kid. Yeah, and he's way better than this creep Schiff. The problem is Schiff is running a brilliant campaign where he's at the top and he's trying to rub off all these these kind of more leftist than him challengers to and promoting this weird I don't know if you've watched any of these ads where they're from Steve Garvey, too conservative, and they're promoting him like on these channels that like the Adam Schiff people, I think that's his name, Schiff, but they wouldn't watch, and so they're pumping him up like, oh yeah, well I actually kind of like Steve Garvey. Like, remember Steve Garvey for the Dodgers and the Padres? Yeah. Shoot, yeah. He
played for 2 California baseball teams?
Yeah. And he had the longest streak other than Lou Gehrig in consecutive games played at one point, or at least the National League record forever. I don't know if he still does. But, so he was a great player, just shy of the Hall of Fame. But anyway, this California political machine that the Democrats have, even if Garvey comes in second, I think he's going to get wiped out in the general election, I guess, because what California does is they batch all the candidates into the primary, and the top 2 vote getters face off. So it's not a Republican versus a Democrat versus a Libertarian. It's just the top 2 of any of that batch, which is totally insane. But the fear is that this socialist woman, I can't remember her name right offhand, that they're doing everything they can just to knock her down at least a third, and then get Garvey up there, because they know that California is extraordinarily pinko commie in the voting for the people that matter. The people like me, don't really have a voice, but the idea, I think, is that the way I analyze it anyway, is that Schiff is going to walk away with the election if he faces Garvey because of the political machine, not because he's more liked. He's not. He's
a creature of the machine. He's a creature of the regime. Yeah, he's horrible.
Yeah.
So anyway, if I can boil this all down to just one sentence, I'm saying principles will save us, and you're saying baseball will save us.
I say baseball will save us. Yeah, boys of summer.
You're probably right.
Steve Garvey.
I'm wrong. You're right.
Also, I believe former defensive back at Michigan State, for any of you Sparty fans out there. So he,
there you go.
Both him and Kirk Gibson played football at Michigan State. I think. Well, I can go on for days about that, but yeah. So any of you football fans, baseball fans, Dodger fans, Padre fans, we got someone in common there to beat this odious Schiff character.
Well, since you've regressed to talking about sports, I have to assume I've answered all of your Libertarian Party related questions,
not all of them,
at the state and national level.
I just wanted to get that off my chest because it's hanging over my head. I've got this ballot due, and I see I was like, when this whole thing about Steve Garvey came up, I found out about it in like December. I'm like, Steve Garvey, like the Steve Garvey running for senator? Like, and then I'm like, well, actually, that's not as totally insane as a guy like Adam Schiff or when it, anyway. So, but no, I always have questions, perhaps more answers than questions as always, but it's always good chatting with us. Cause I'm like I said, I was interested in how the sausage was made. So, I guess, if I were to wrap this up, other than my advocacy for Steve Garvey, not an endorsement, but just like screw your head on a little tighter, if you're in California. But I would say that as far as the convention goes, it was just a way to see a lot more of these candidates in depth and really get them to explain their ideas and get their feet held to the fire and see how they do. Really. I mean, that's how it is. It's not that way in Democratic or Republican primaries or in the one-on-one, Trump versus Biden. That's just like yelling versus drooling.
One of the really nice things about the libertarian approach structure, especially in this digital internet age, is that they will frequently, these candidates running for the LP nomination, attend state conventions and have debates there amongst each other.
Yeah, I've
watched, a half a dozen of them, and there's going to be several more in the next month or so. And you really, as you said, they have multiple rounds to poke and jab and refine their positions and their message. Should they be allowed to be our nominee? Because,
and so in
most
California,
of their
did they
opinions
take a
are the
vote?
same.
Did they take a vote on who they thought would be the nominee?
Like a straw poll or something?
Yeah. Or is it just
frequently?
Yeah. So it's just but it was really just a place to express ideas. It wasn't necessarily.
The straw poll is informal. The point is to get their message out to the delegates or presumptive delegates and attract attention and supporters.
And
that there's several rounds of that, and that's a good thing. And then it'll all be chosen. It'll all be decided in DC in May.
Okay. Yeah. You heading out there?
I will be there.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up here. Make sure to go to naturalorderpodcast.com, naturalordersubstack.com. You can go there too with the Substack, but most of our stuff is actually just naturalorderpodcast.com. I would also send you to heymannature.com or .substack.com, either way, and that gets you Adam's new show, Heyman Nature, of course. And it gets you on the email list. So he'll send you 5 emails a week at least, and extra when the podcasts come out. BrianDOleary.com is where you go to get any of my stuff. Podcasts, writing, starting to break into video too a little bit. We're working on that.
Nice.
And
if I could just direct the good folks to my YouTube show called Heyman Nature.
Yeah, on YouTube as well, right?
On the YouTube, yep.
Yep, and then anything else, just reach out to us. If you're not listening to us on Fountain.fm, the podcasting app, start right now. I'll put a link for that in the show notes as well, so you can get away from Apple, but you can just earn Bitcoin as you listen, and it's a pretty easy way to do it, pretty way to get started on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, I don't know, I didn't check the price today, but it's just, my modest Bitcoin holdings keep going up right now. Pretty soon to crater, but they're going up right now. So I like that. Anyway, for Adam Heyman, I am Brian O'Leary. Good day. For show notes and more resources on today's episode, go to naturalorderpodcast.com/F21. And for more of Adam Heyman stuff, that's heymannature.com or heymannature.substack.com. Brian O'Leary, go to briandoleary.com. Make sure to sign up for the email lists on both of those. And also, as always, sign up for the email when you get to naturalorderpodcast.com, where we have a whole boatload of resources for you as well. Thanks for listening.